Faster Than Light is an instant classic. It raised over $200,000 on Kickstarter, and has since sold over 1.5 million copies. The premise is pretty simple. Command the crew on your spaceship as you try in vain to avoid a rebel pirate turning it into an oxygen-devoid husk, or a pulsar that decides to shut down half your weapons as you jump into a fight, or a huge fire that wipes out your entire crew as your ship is pounded by asteroids. The list goes on. There's some stuff about transporting vital information and a huge overpowered boss at the end, but if we're being honest, you won't get to that stage for a while. The game's roguelike replayability is definitely enhanced by a healthy dose of RNG, but its addictiveness is also partially fueled by its incredible atmosphere. While the text-based storytelling leaves a lot to the imagination, composer Ben Prunty's minimalist composition style and the 16-bit spacescape he creates provide the perfect backdrop for the player to lose themselves in a sci-fi galaxy. Many of the themes in FTL's soundtrack are built around a single melodic idea, fleshed out over time with supporting synthesizers, percussion, and sound effects. The track Milky Way is entirely based around this descending theme. The descending arpeggio outlines a chord progression starting with the tonic E minor, followed by D major, C major 7, and then returning to the tonic via D major. The piece's melody is introduced over the third repetition of the arpeggio and follows a similar melodic contour. This makes it feel like an extension of the arpeggiated theme, retaining the minimalist, lost in space aesthetic. A lot of the time, space is musically described with rich orchestral sounds. Think the movies Interstellar or Ad Astra. This makes FTL's soundtrack come across as a breath of fresh air. I'm sure budget limitations were definitely a consideration here, as the game's only made by a couple of people, but Prunty's different, minimalist, synthesizer-based approach is one way of making the player see the game's world in a different light. This aesthetic is also retained through the way in which the piece is mixed. Prunty uses a delay effect on the main arpeggiated chord progression. This makes the theme appear to be more complex, creating overlapping and syncopated tones which obscure the main melody. It feels very much inspired by minimalist pieces from composers like Max Richter. Additionally, the simulation of a large space through reverb effects adds to the spatial awareness of the music, enhancing the player's feeling of isolation floating through a vast, derelict galaxy. In fact, isolation seems to be a recurring theme in FTL. Time and again you come across small, remote space stations or stranded travelers selling wares to try and buy enough fuel to get home. The more you think about it, each text-based interaction paints an increasingly depressing picture of systems that have been totally stripped by the war. And all the while, as the ever-present threat of death by giant alien spiders or the pursuing rebel fleet looms, the gentle purr of ambient synthesizers is juxtaposed over the beautiful, eerie background planets. Or, in the case of the deep space theme, there's no music at all, just creaks and echoes soaked in the space you're floating through. There's not a lot of downtime in FTL, so every jump where you're left sitting next to a planet or asteroid field just waiting for your ship to charge is actually pretty lonely. I think it's remarkable how such a simplistic game can capture these feelings in much the same way as bigger titles like Elite Dangerous. Yes, it's not as impressive visually as a fully realised 3D Galaxy, but while FTL usually receives praise for its engaging gameplay, challenge, and extremely replayable take on the roguelike genre, I think the most impressive thing about the game is how much they've created with so little. This game came out in 2012, and it still had text-based story and graphics, and yet they've done a better job creating both atmosphere and gameplay than most AAA studios. Maybe, if the big guys want to learn how it's really done, They should put down their hot dogs and pretzels and watch some indie devs smash it out of the ballpark.